Hello, this is my presentation to the 1990s by me, Ryan Nagel. So the presidents, you have George Bush Sr. and you have Bill Clinton. Um, the 41st president of the United States was George Herbert Walker Bush, known as Bush Sr. He was born in Milton, Massachusetts on June 12th, 1924. Bush's family here. Bush had a very privileged childhood as his family had very tight values of such as from those to whom much is given and much is expected. His education, he went on the boarding school to Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts, that matched his parents' type values, as the school's motto was not for self. He served his country. He joined the Navy on his 18th birthday. He fought during World War II, went to flight training, and became the youngest pilot in the Navy. He built a family. He went on leave from the Navy in 1945, went on to marry Barbara Pierce. Bush and Barbara had 3 kids, one being the future 43rd President George W. Bush Jr., and tragically, one of his children, Robin, was diagnosed with leukemia and passed away before her 4th birthday. Ever since his loss, he's carried the gold medallion that says "For the Love of Robin." Bush got in the industry before he got into the politics. He was offered a job at his dad's Wall Street firm. While working there, he invested in lots of land, hoping to hit some oil. He partnered with John Overby, who was an expert in the oil industry, and with his help, they both became very successful, making over $350,000. Bush was a very loyal man and always tried to do what's right, and he was very generous by creating this 1,000 Points of Light program, who recognized those who were also as generous as him. The program would shine light on people who would always help others. Bush went to Yale. He was a very good sports player. After serving in World War II, he went to Yale University in 1945 to play on their varsity baseball team. He played first base and always was known for being their team leader. To start off his political career, he became the Republican Party chairman in Harris County, Texas in 1963. Fast forward a year later, he decided to run for the U.S. Senate against Ralph Yarborough. And the election did not go so well for Bush, as Yarborough beat him by over 1.4 million votes. So 2 years later, in 1966, Bush ran again and won over by 50%. The United Nations, Bush went on and lost 2 more Senate elections before President Nixon nominated him to be a U.S. ambassador at the United Nations. He was ambassador for a little while before Nixon pulled him back down to the chairman of the Republican National Committee. He directed the CIA. President Ford asked Bush to be the new director of the CIA, so he served as director from January 1976 to January 1977. Bush returned to Houston, Texas in 1980 and started planning for the presidential campaign. After Iraq invaded Kuwait, the United States invaded Kuwait and took from the Iraqis. This is one of the first few things that Bush did during his presidency. He carried out Operation Shield and Operation Storm. Shield was to defend Saudi Arabia from getting invaded by the Iraqis, and Operation Storm was to attack Iraq and protect Kuwait by invading and taking the countries back from the Iraqis. He also signed the American with Disabilities Act on July 26, 1990. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act that prohibits discrimination and forced accommodation for those with disabilities. This was accomplished by people chaining themselves to entrances to building and wheel wells on buses. They did that because there was no accommodations like wheelchair access into buildings or on the bus they chained themselves to. He also signed the Clean Air Act into law on November 15th, 1990. This act was to add provisions to phase out the ozone-depleting chemicals factories would use. Its themes were to provide a framework for alternative clean fuels, promote the use of clean low sulfur coal, and natural gas. Now we're going to move on to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was the 42nd president of the United States right after Bush. He was originally born as William Jefferson Blythe III on August 19th in 1946 in Hope, Arkansas. He never met his biological father, as he died in a fatal car accident before Clinton was born. Later on, his mother married Roger Clinton, whose last name Bill took in high school. Clinton's childhood wasn't always easy, as his stepfather Roger struggled with alcohol addiction addiction and was sometimes abusive. He met JFK when he was in high school. He did really well in high school despite his childhood struggles. He was interested in politics at a very young age. Again, he went on to meet JFK, John F. Kennedy, on a trip to the White House in 1963, and JFK inspired him to be president one day. His education. Clinton, after high school, he went to Georgetown University, then later studied at Oxford before he went to Yale, where he met his future wife, Hillary Rodham. After Clinton graduated, he returned to Arkansas to teach law and began his political career. At just 32 years old, he became the governor of Arkansas, making him the youngest governor in the nation. He lost a re-election in 1980, but was soon to be back in the governor's mansion in 1982. He won the 1992 presidential election. He went against Bush Sr. This was during the time Americans were struggling through an economic recession. Clinton focused his campaign on improving the economy, and people seemed to like his view of fixing the economy, and then he won the election. His economy accomplishments. One of his biggest accomplishments was creating a strong economy with low unemployment rates and budget surpluses. He worked with Congress to raise taxes on wealthy Americans and cut government spending. The North American Trade Agreement, which is called NAFTA. Clinton signed NAFTA, which increased trade between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, so the whole North America. The agreement was to eliminate the tariffs, ease restrictions on cross-border trade, and hold workplace safety. During his presidency, he had the Monica Lewinsky scandal. This was a big major event. He had an affair with his intern in the White House and was impeached, but was acquitted by the Senate so he could finish his presidential term. Now we're going to move on to the 15 events of the 1990s. Bush signed the American with Disabilities Act, the ADA. This was a very important act in the 1990s. The signing of it. Many disabled Americans struggled because buildings and buses were not accessible to them. Activists protested for years to push the government to pass the law. But the ADA ultimately became one of the most important civil rights movements in American history. Here's some of the pictures of the protests they had, and then here's Bush signing the law. Moving on to Operation Desert Shield. This was August 6th of 1990. This began after Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990. Bush sent American troops to Saudi Arabia to prevent Iraq from invading more countries. The United States worked with many other nations to build a military coalition against Iraq. Thousands of the troop and military equipment were sent to the Middle East, and the operation was mainly defensive and focused on protecting Saudi Arabia. And the Desert Shield went on later to become Operation Desert Storm. So here's some of the guys. Desert Shield. Here's their planes they took, and then the badge. Moving on to Desert Storm. Operation Desert Storm began on January 17th, 1991, after Iraq refused to surrender and leave Kuwait. This was the combat phase of the Gulf War. The United States and coalition forces launched airstrikes and ground attacks against Iraq after Saddam Hussein refused to leave Kuwait. Advanced military technology like the stealth bombers, the precision missiles were used heavily during the war. The coalition forces quickly defeated Iraq and liberated Kuwait in just only a few weeks, and their victory greatly increased Bush's popularity and showed the military strength of the United States after the Cold War. Moving on to the collapse of the Soviet Union. They officially collapsed in 1991, on Christmas of 1991, which ended the Cold War between the United States and the Soviets. The communist governments across Eastern Europe had already been falling apart before this happened, and the Soviets were the last to fall. The Soviet Union dissolved, Russia became an independent country with several other nations, and then the United States was pretty much the world's only superpower at this point. This changed global politics and reduced tension between the U.S. and former communist countries. Here's them on their fallen day. They were protesting this stuff. They did not want their Soviet Union to dissolve, basically. Moving on to the LA riots. This was April 29th, 1992. Riots broke out after people seen Rodney King get beat by four LAPD officers. And it wasn't even just that; they were angry after the fact that all four of them were acquitted, so they could go back in the workforce and pretty much no penalty, from what I think. So yeah, they were acquitted. They burnt down buildings. They looted buildings. More than 60 people were killed. Many were injured, and buildings were set on fire and really destroyed. As you can see here, here's some of the people who were protesting and the buildings that were fire, and you could just see, like, a car that was beaten down and set on fire. Moving on to the 27th Amendment getting ratified. This was in 1992. Even though it was originally written in, I believe, 200 years ago. Yeah, it was wrote 200 years ago, and the amendments just basically prevented members of Congress from giving themselves immediate pay raises. Here's the 27th Amendment. No law varying the compensation for the services of the senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representation. A representative shall be intervened. So basically saying that they cannot give themselves pay raises until the new election. Or they don't do it at all. Here's the bombing of the World Trade Center on February 26, 1993. This happened when terrorists detonated a truck bomb underneath the World Trade Center in New York City. This explosion killed 6 people and injured over 1,000 others. The attackers hoped the towers would collapse, and but the buildings remained standing. Luckily, the bombing shocked the Americans and increased concern about terrorism in the United States. Here's the aftermath. Here's the Twin Towers before anything, and then here's the inside of it and some of the lower building. Moving on to the Branch Davidians, they called this the Waco Siege on February 28th, 1993. This began when federal agents attempted to raid the Branch Davidian compound near Waco, Texas. The group was led by David Koresh, who claimed to be a religious prophet. A gun battle broke out between agents and the members of the compound, leading to death on both sides, the FBI and the people inside the compound. They had this place surrounded for 51 days, and they used 400 canisters of tear gas to try to get the group out of the building. They locked themselves in there for, they believed Judgment Day was coming, and for the second coming of Jesus Christ. So these people were very religious, and they locked themselves in there, were not coming out. They were isolating themselves from the outside world for Judgment Day. Here's what that looked like. Here's their compound here. You can see this was set ablaze. Fire broke out during the raid, killing many of the Branch Davidians, and this event became highly controversial and increased distrust towards the federal government. NAFTA takes effect on January 1st, 1994. This was the North American Free Trade Agreement. Bill Clinton signed this during his presidency. This was an agreement that removed many of the trade barriers, like the tariffs, and between all through North America, the tariffs would be done. They'd be lowered, or they would, they wouldn't be there. The critics argued that American factory jobs would move to Mexico because labor costs are less there. That's ultimately what happened. People went to Mexico because they were afraid of losing their job. But the people who believed in it, the supporters, they believed it would increase trade and strengthen the business. Here's NAFTA here. Here's him signing NAFTA, and then the leaders. On to the Oklahoma City bombing on April 19th, 1995. This was one of the most deadly acts of domestic terrorism in American history. Timothy McVeigh detonated a truck bomb outside a federal building in Oklahoma City. This explosion killed 168 people, including children inside of a daycare center. The bombing shocked the nation, again, led to increased security at federal buildings. It also increased concerns about anti-government extremist groups in the United States. Here's what the building looked like after it was bombed. Very, very big damage here. Very fatal. Here's the .com boom. This is not in my script. The .com boom was a period of rapid economic growth caused by the rise of internet and the technology and online companies. Yahoo and Amazon became very popular. They attracted large investors. Millions of people were buying home computers and dial-up internet. They were able to use these online services with dial-up internet. These businesses like Yahoo and Amazon created new jobs and new industries. This made Bill Clinton look really good with his new economy, and really helped him out with his statistics. Um, this is Amazon.com. This is what they called Bill. I forget his name. The founder of Amazon. This was his garage. This is Yahoo.com at the time. You could see news, politics, your email. Here's the dial-up internet. Here's what that looked like, and this is what your home computer would look like. Ran on Microsoft Windows 95, which was really what gave the friendly interface to a computer. December 19th, 1998, after the Monica Lewinsky scandal, Bill Clinton was impeached. He was accused of perjury and obstruction of justice and lying under oath about the relationship. This impeachment created major political division across the country. However, the Senate later voted to acquit Clinton, allowing him to remain president for the rest of his term. This was the most controversial political scandals in American history. Here's him speaking at the impeachment, and then here's the House that impeached him. Moving on to the Columbine shooting on April 20th, 1999. This was when two students attacked their high school with guns and explosives. Their whole school with guns and explosives. 13 people were killed before the shooters took their own lives. This tragedy shocked the entire country and received massive media coverage. After Columbine, schools across America, they started increasing security, emergency drills like the lockdown drills, where you hide under your desk or you hide in a corner of a room, or you just be really quiet. This caused big debate about gun laws and bullying and school safety. So, this really brought more precaution. Then here are the victims that were taken. These are the killers, the shooters, and these are the people that had to evacuate their school with their hands up. The Y2K panic begins throughout 1999. It started in 1990 at the end of 1998. Where's my notes here? It was caused by the fears that computers would fail when the year changed from 1999 to 2000s. Because many of the older computer systems, they only use the last two digits of the years, like 99 and 00. So they were concerned that it would read 2000 as 1900, and business and governments just spent billions of dollars updating their computer systems before the new year. They feared power outages, banking failures, transportation problems, and some people believe that there would be an apocalypse and computers would turn evil. This really shows how dependent people were on computers at this time. Here's a little cartoon of what people thought would happen. They just thought everything would go crazy. They would become crazy. Best Buy, they had this sticker, remember to turn your computer off before midnight on New Year's in 99. But ultimately, nothing ever happened. Y2K was just a big panic. Nothing ever happened. It was okay. Year 2 in 2000, no computers exploded, no apocalypse. We're good. Moving on to the 1990s culture. Moving on to the political movements. The Republican Revolution. The division between the Democrats and the Republicans increased. The Republicans gained control of Congress for the first time in over 40 years. After the Columbine shooting, people were really talking about gun control and how their guns were becoming a major issue, raising violence and school shootings. Again, the Americans with Disabilities Act that Bush signed forced businesses and places to require wheelchair accessibility. This also, protected people from being discriminated in their place of work or to go get a job. Again, the Rodney King protests, the people who protested the riots here, or protested Rodney King getting beaten by LAPD officers. Here's the riot. The gay rights. The gay rights movement was for more visibility and inclusion by the gays. Bill Clinton signed this signed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Act that let homosexuals into the military without disclosing their sexual orientation. Here's their protest. They wanted their rights. The economic boom or recession. The rise of the internet started to become an accessible. The internet started to become an accessible platform when the Internet Explorer was created with Microsoft and included the expansion of the World Wide Web. Email and online chat services revolutionized communication. My notes. Anyways. Revolutionized communication and connected people from anywhere. The internet also contributed to the dot-com boom with the rise of online businesses like Yahoo and Amazon. And people started buying more home computers and dial-up internet so they could stay connected to everybody. There was a strong economy under Bill Clinton. He dropped the employment rate by over 5%. The stock market grew rapidly, and the internet boom created companies that opened up new jobs and markets. The NAFTA controversy. Some people moved to Mexico because the labor for factory jobs were cheaper there. The factory jobs moved to Mexico. People feared that they would lose their manufacturing jobs in America. The Y2K panic again. People feared the computers would stop working. Businesses would spend millions of dollars fixing or upgrade their computers before the new year 2000 to avoid a computer failure. Y2K ultimately highlighted their people's independence on computers at that time. Their dependence on computers at that time. When people freaked out and spent billions of dollars to upgrade their computers, so Y2K wouldn't affect them. Schools and businesses really relied on more on computers by this time, and the internet and technology was part of the everyday American life. Here's some of the statistics of things, everyday items you'd buy or you'd see. I mean, things in this world that you would buy now. So the national debt of America was at $3 trillion at this time. The average salary was $29,943. A teacher's salary was anywhere from $32,000 to $33,000. Minimum wage at this time was $3.80. A new house in 1990 in Michigan was $61,000. A new car was $12,000, around there. A gas price per gallon was $1.16. Your home computers could be anywhere from $1,500 to $3,300. Your 2-liter Pepsi would have costed $1 to $1.50. Your McDonald's hamburger at this time was 71 cents. This was all as of 1990. Here's some of the military actions that happened here. Start with Operation Desert Shield. Desert Shield was to protect Saudi Arabia from getting invaded by the Iraqis, and and they also, in Desert Storm, they took back Kuwait from the Iraqs and protected the other countries. The Gulf War was one of the most important military conflicts in the 90s. The Desert Shield defended Saudi Arabia, while Operation Desert Storm pushed Iraq out of Kuwait. And then after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States was the world's strongest superpower again. I didn't put that in there. Cute. They increased their concerns of terrorism after the World Trade Center bombing and the Oklahoma City bombing. The Waco siege was when they invaded the Branch Davidians for illegal holding of weapons. They had an armory of weapons in there that were illegally held on to. The LA riots, again, those were the people who were protesting the what's his name? Rodney King. They were protesting Rodney King's beat down by 4 LAPD officers. Oh, what did I do? Here's the fashion of the 90s. We have women wearing crop tops, baggy jeans, tube tops, bright colors, platform shoes, and chunky sneakers, and accessories like chokers, scrunchies, hoop earrings, and those were popular. Now here's the scrunchies, their crop tops, and their baggy jeans, and their bright colors. The men's fashion of the 90s, they had oversized clothing, the flannel shirts, the ripped jeans, the Nike, the Air Jordans, and there's their fits. Social aspect of the 90s, you had dial-up internet services. People used AOL chat rooms and emails to communicate with each other online from anywhere with the internet, with their dial-up internet. The video game systems, kids and families played on consoles like the Nintendo 64, with games like Super Mario and Mario Kart. America was ultimately connected to each other a lot better with websites like Yahoo, the internet, TV, rather than having to wait for the newspaper to come. The Columbine shooting opened the eyes to Americans again, to incorporate better school safety and racism and police brutality. After the Rodney King incident with LAPD, people started talking about inequality and police brutality towards those of color. The entertainment, and during the 90s, you had movies like the Titanic, Jurassic Park, Pixar's Toy Story, Disney's Lion King. These are all popular movies during the 90s. Cable television became more popular with MTV, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network. They're mostly popular with kids and teenagers. Sitcoms and TV shows appealed to the families who watch shows together at night. Shows like Friends was very popular. Grunge music, bands like Nirvana created a more darker and emotional style of music with their hit song Smells Like Teen Spirit, became a symbol of the teenage life during the 90s. Creed was also a very popular band throughout the 90s with their hit debut album My Own Prison. Hip-hop became mainstream during this time. Rappers like Tupac, they became major celebrities. The pop music, Britney Spears and the Backstreet Boys dominated the radio and the TV during this decade. MTV really helped shape the music industry throughout the 90s, adding visuals to the songs, creating the now called music videos. Here are my top 4 bangers from the 90s. These are my personal 90s favorite songs. You got Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, My Own Prison by Creed, Bleed the Freak by Alice in Chains, and California Love by Tupac. The trends and fads of the 90s, you had Pokemon cards, you had the TV shows and the video games, all by Pokemon. With their sacred holographic Charizard, which is a really, really expensive card nowadays. The Tamagotchis, the kids played on their little keychains, and they got to take care of their digital pet with feeding them and cleaning them up throughout the day. Video game consoles like the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation changed gaming forever with their three-dimensional graphics. Trends and the fads, again, we have Blockbuster Video. Their families would go to the store, rent VHS and video games on the weekends. Back to the internet again. Teens would use chat services like AOL and ICQ to talk to friends on the weekends. And also on the weekends, teens would go to mall shopping and eat with their friends on the weekends. Foods and candy in the 90s. Dunkaroos were a very popular snack with the kids. I say I could do that. This snack had cookies and frosting to dip the cookies in. Ring Pops was, just the kids over the 90s, they just loved the candy that they could wear and carry around. Gushers and Fruit Roll-Ups, kids loved the sugary fruit snacks and the bright colors and fun commercials that would help them sell. So here's one of the Gushers.
There's a mouth-watering new Gushers flavor with a taste that's huge!
Heavy, man!
Watermelon flavor bursting with watermelon juice inside. New Watermelon Blast Gushers. Whoa, what a melon! Fruit Tonic Punch Gushers fruit snacks. They're very, very different because they're bursting with juicy fruit punch in the middle. So fruity, they'll really turn your head.
Whoa, I'll say.
Fruit Tonic Punch Gushers. They'll drive you fruity.
Again, these commercials really appealed to the young kids at this time.
There's a mouth-watering.
Back to the food. We had Lunchables. These changed the school lunches for the parents so much. They just had the pre-made lunch that were quick and convenient, just throw in the lunchbox for the kids, send them to school. McDonald's is one of the most popular fast food restaurants in America. Happy Meals and their play place would appeal to the children and the families. Capri Sun and Sunny D were the most popular drinks. amongst children. Many of them drank them with school lunches and after-school sports. Now into the sports. Michael Jordan dominated the NBA during the 1990s. He was the GOAT, basically. Dallas Cowboys were on a revolutionary run during the 90s. Nowadays, they are not. Tiger Woods became big during the 90s. He's one of the biggest golf stars. Again, NASCAR, they grew massively. Dale Earnhardt Sr., Jeff Gordon, Richard Petty, they became the national celebrities. They're still recognized today. Do it for Dale. Number 3. 1994 MLB World Series was canceled because the owners and the players could not agree on the contracts. People protested this, and they did not want baseball to go on strike. During the 90s, extreme sports like skateboarding and BMX biking started to become big. You can see down here they had their courses, and this guy's riding on a rail. And here's every website I went to. Thank you.